So if you've been thinking about going on a solo road trip in the Appalachian Mountains, I would maybe listen to this story and possibly reconsider. Because the person who sent me this story did exactly that, and I don't think they'll be doing it anytime soon. So with that being said, grab your favorite tea and settle in, and let me tell you a scary story from the Appalachian Mountains, because of course, this is Tea After Midnight. Happy Friday. I needed this today. This story comes from Jason. Hi, my name is Jason, and I've got a creepy story that happened to me in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. It was 2013 when this happened, and I was 24 at the time. I was at work when my dad called me to tell me that my Uncle John had passed away. My dad was very close to him. My Uncle John lived in North Carolina while the rest of my family lives here in Florida. Dad told me the arrangements for Uncle John's funeral would be in a few days and that him and Mom would be heading out the next morning to go be with my aunt. I wish I would have left with them to go up there, but I had to work the next day and said that I would head out after work the next day and meet them up there. I used to love going on road trips, but I had never been on one this long before. From where I lived in Florida to where my aunt and uncle lived in North Carolina, it was about a 10-hour drive. After work the next day, I went to my house to take a nap just to make sure I had plenty of rest for the long drive ahead. I didn't sleep all that well because I wasn't used to sleeping at that time of day. Once I woke up, I got in the car and started to head that way. And the first half of the drive was just fine, and about 5 hours in, it started to rain really heavy. I could barely see where I was going. Of course, it was completely dark outside, and I was somewhere in Georgia with no idea what was around me. I could see a little pull-off, so I pulled over to try and wait the rain out. As I'm sitting there, I'm looking out the windows, trying to see if I could make out anything around me, but it was so dark I couldn't see anything but the road. I had been pulled over for about 10 minutes when I felt something slam into the back of my car. I thought someone had rear-ended me while I was parked, but I couldn't see anything behind me. I opened the car door and leaned out to look behind me, but there was nothing there. It really freaked me out, so I decided to keep going, even though I could barely see with all the heavy rain. I drove for about 30 more minutes and the rain started to lighten up, thankfully. I was still really unnerved from what had happened, but I had just figured that it was a tree branch that had fallen on the back of my car. With that thought in my mind, I thought it best to pull over at a gas station to check it out and also to get some gas. I drove a little bit longer and found a gas station, so I pulled into the pump. I got out and walked around to the back of my car and saw what I can only describe as claw marks on the top of the trunk. I honestly didn't know what could have made that kind of damage. I went inside and paid for the gas, and as I'm pumping, I keep feeling like something is watching me. It really creeped me out, so I finished up and got back on the road. I was driving for a little bit when I started to get really tired. I kept yawning and nothing I did helped. I tried blasting the AC and the music, but nothing was helping. So I decided to make the worst decision of my life. I pulled into an old gas station that was clearly abandoned that was sitting in the middle of nowhere, right next to the woods. I really don't know why I did this, but I would soon realize how big of a mistake that was. I made sure the doors were locked and I reclined back in my seat and closed my eyes. I fell asleep but woke up to the sound of a loud scratching noise on the side of my car. I jolted awake and grabbed the tire iron on the seat next to me. The windows were completely fogged up and I couldn't see outside. I wiped the window off of my driver's side door and all I could see were eyes staring back at me. Human eyes, but they didn't belong to a human. They were attached to a black figure that was easily 8 foot tall with long, sharp fingers. The figure was leaned over with one hand on my driver's side window, just staring at me with its soulless, beady eyes. I threw the car in drive and sped off completely terrified. At that point it was 4 a.m. and I called my dad. I was only a few hours away from them and I told him everything that had happened. He said not to stop anymore and to come straight there. He met me outside when I pulled up and I could see him looking at the driver's side door. I got out and looked at the large gash that went from the bumper of my car all the way to my driver's side door. This was no scratch. It was a gash in the metal. To this day, I've never been able to figure out what made the gashes in the car, and honestly, I don't want to find out. I followed my parents back home after the funeral and have never went on a road trip by myself ever again. And honestly, I don't think I ever will. Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to be taking a solo road trip in Appalachia, like, ever. And I'll tell you this, when he was stopped the first time because he couldn't see because of the rain, I think whatever was there that hit the back of his car followed him to the next location. And honestly, I don't even know what he saw. To me, it sounds like the Hat Man, and I've had a lot of people send me stories about the Hat Man, and everybody's account that they've told me has been eerily similar. But this thing having human eyes, that absolutely sends shivers down my spine, because what do you mean, human eyes? Honestly, I'm going to leave it up to you guys in the comments to let me know what you think this could be, because to me it sounds like the Hat Man, but I've never heard a description of the Hat Man having human eyes. That's a new one to me. And honestly, I'm absolutely terrified, and now I'm scared to drive at night. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. Now, if you have any personal scary stories you want to share, I would love to read it, and it doesn't have to be about the Appalachian Mountains. If you want to send it to me, you can send it to my email, which will be right here on the screen, or I'll put it in the caption below. Now, let me just take a moment to say thank you so much for being here. Like, genuinely, you guys mean the world to me, and I want you to know that. Seriously, you guys blow me away daily with the love and the support that you show, and it just truly means the world to me, so thank you from the bottom of my heart. But I hope you have the best night. I love you so much, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
I found myself on the haunted side. I think I found myself on the haunted side of TikTok. Growing up in a Mexican household, I was always told scary stories, so I always kind of believed in this stuff. But I was always a little bit skeptical until it actually happened to me. So I remember this one time I was young. I was probably between the age of 10 and 13. I don't remember. It's just this moment is engraved in my brain. I have two sisters and my mom and dad, and we had gone out to a party in the pueblo that we lived in Mexico. And my mom and one of my sisters, we decided to come back home early from the fiesta. We head back home. Now, where we lived, it was one big piece of land with 3 homes in it. So you go in through the front gate, which is my grandmother's house. You have to walk past my grandmother's house. The second house it was our house. And the last house was my uncle's house. Now, behind my uncle's house was just a bunch of forest. And on the side of that entire property is just a huge cornfield. Que susto, scary as hell already to live there, because it's just darkness and cornfield. This shit's what your nightmares are made of, right? So we come home, we walk through past my grandma's house, we go into our house, and we're chilling. My dad decided to stay back at the party with one of my sisters. My mom is in one of the bedrooms y está planchando. She's ironing the clothes like she always is at night, because she has to be all planchadita for the next day, you know? And me and my sister are in our bedroom. I don't remember what the fuck we're doing, we're just hanging out. All of a sudden we hear the door knocking, and mind you, these doors are made out of like a metal, fierro. Everything echoes in that fucking house. Everything echoed. So we hear somebody knock on the big metal door, and I run to my mom. I'm like, I think my dad's here. Dad must be home. He was at the party still, so he came home with my sister. So my mom goes to check the door. She goes to try to open the door, and there's nobody there. Mind you, we don't know what the fuck is going on, because my tío is out at the party. My grandparents are already asleep, and we're the only ones on that property that are still awake. But there's like no one there, and we're like, oh shit. So we all cuddled up in the kids' room, which is our room, me, my mom, my sister, and we're just sitting there like scared because we didn't see anybody outside. There was no one outside. It was just a knock and then silence. And we're sitting there all fucking scared. Está precisando, you know, we're like rezando, you know, praying to Jesus that, you know, the diablo hasn't come for us. Satan's here. We're gonna be dead, whatever. And then we hear a door knock on the kitchen door, which is maybe like 15 steps away from the first door. And then at that point, we're freaked out. We go check to see if there's anyone outside. Nobody is outside. Nobody. So we're fucking freaked out. We're like all cuddled up in the room. We waited. I don't know how long we waited. It was probably over an hour before we heard my dad walking up and talking to my sister, and he opened the door because he doesn't need to knock. He just opened the door and came in. Still to this day, do not know what the fuck that was. And obviously you don't want to open the door to like a fucking skinwalker or La Llorona or something. I don't know. Scariest shit that ever happened to me. There was nobody else on that property. We brought it up the next day to my grandma, my grandpa, my tios. It was nobody. and nobody can get in that property unless you got past my grandma's house, which is gated. It made no sense. Moral of the story is, don't be by yourself in Mexico because it's scary out there. That shit's scary. Weird shit happens all the time, and it happened to me. Don't even get me started on the stories my mom's told me about her childhood. Girl, freaky shit.
Spooky Scary Storytime submission came from Carla, who said she's worked for the past 12 years as a housekeeper in Las Vegas. And her career started at a casino resort where she would clean out guest rooms after guests had checked out. And she says she could tell you a lot of wild stories about the crazy things she's found when guests have left. But by far, the creepiest and most unsettling thing she's ever found was in the closet of a rich man's penthouse. So when her career started, as I said, she was working at a casino resort. But after 5 years of working there, she needed to make a little bit more money. And she decided she was going to branch out and start her own business. And her own business started with cleaning short-term rentals, things like Airbnbs and things like that. She was trustworthy, her rates were competitive, and so business grew fast. She got a lot of new clients via word of mouth, and eventually she decided to branch out because she had so many clients, and she started cleaning single-family homes and apartments, and she had repeat clients. And so she hired some people to work at the short-term rentals, and she would take on these clients herself. A lot of these clients were people who actually lived in Las Vegas, families and single people who just wanted her to come every week or every month. And she had this one family that she had worked for a few years, and they tell her one day, hey, we have this friend who's new to town. He just got a penthouse at a building downtown, and he's looking for a reliable and trustworthy housekeeper. Do you think you could take him on? And Carla said she was fully booked at this point. She had no time to take on additional clients, but her husband was going through a very severe illness. He was not working, and she was the sole earner for her family. She said hospital bills were expensive and they definitely needed the money. And so when her friends/clients tell her that they have another friend that's looking, she's like, well, I'll go speak to him and see what he needs done and how much time it's going to take. Maybe I could take him on. So she goes to meet this man, and I'm not sure what building this was in downtown Las Vegas, but she said it was a very nice penthouse. It was a 3-bedroom and 2-bath. It wasn't massive by any means, but it was very, very nice. The man was in his mid-40s. He was very well dressed. He seemed polite. He tells her that he is essentially a clean freak and he absolutely hates dust. He also tells her that he doesn't live in Vegas full time. He's just there on occasion. And when he is, he wants a nice clean place to lay his head. But he still wants her to come every single week, whether he's been in the penthouse or not. And she said, based on the size of the place and how infrequently he was there, it really only took her between 2 and 4 hours to deep clean the main areas of the house. So the bathrooms, the kitchen, the living areas. One of the bedrooms was set up as his office from which he worked when he was in town, but he told her he didn't really need her to do anything in there besides a light dusting. Also tells her he has a laundry service that handles all of his clothing and that she is never ever to go into any of his closets. And she's like, I'm fine with that. And he says, no, this is why I wanted someone referred to me via word of mouth, someone that was trusted by someone I knew, because I have a lot of valuable things and I just don't want them in the wrong hands. And Carla's like, no worries, you can trust me. I have a good reputation for a reason. At the end of this first conversation, during their first meeting, he offers her a very competitive rate and she essentially just can't turn it down. So she ends up taking him on as a client and she ends up working for him for 2 years. And during this 2 years, she never really found out what he did for work. He never offered up any information and she never asked, but he was very polite. Anytime he was in town and she was cleaning the place, he would offer her to get her food if he was ordering lunch. He would tip her very well every time she cleaned, and then especially around holidays. He never saw any other guests there, and anytime he was there, he was basically always on the phone, always something with business, but he would speak vaguely, so she never really could put any pieces together as to what it was he actually did. Knew that he went overseas a lot, but overall she was just very grateful to have him as a client. He was very generous, and he even offered to let her husband borrow one of his very nice suits when her husband was getting better and going to job interviews. He had one of his suits actually custom tailored to fit her husband so that her husband could wear it and that they didn't have to buy one. She said in 7 years of owning her business, he was by far one of the top 3 clients that she had had. And so one day she's over there and she's cleaning out one of his bathrooms and he's in town and she hasn't seen him for about 2 months. And she hadn't really talked to him because he was on the phone when she got over there. But she's cleaning out the bathroom and all of a sudden he barges in the bathroom and he says, I have to leave right now. I'm so sorry. I wanted to catch up with you a little bit, but I'm going to leave your money by the door. And he just seemed very frantic and unlike himself because otherwise he was very calm and cool and collected. And so she just says, oh my gosh, I hope everything's okay. And he goes, me too. And he had this look of fear in his eyes. And so he runs into his bedroom and he quickly packs a bag and he's out the door. She's finishing up the job and she's just kind of thinking the whole time, like, I hope everything's okay with him. I've never seen him like that. And as she's almost done, there's a knock at the door and she answers and it's the laundry service. I'm not sure if this was like in-house or if this was an outside service, but regardless, they drop off some of his dry cleaning and she takes it in and she's just thinking, I'm going to put this away for him. At least this will be here, when he gets back. And she goes into his main bedroom and then opens the closet door, which she had never been in before. And it's this massive closet and there's multiple racks of clothes and accessories, very well organized. And she walks toward the back of the closet where she sees other suits are hanging up in plastic. And she starts kind of making some room on the rack to hang these suits. And behind the last suit, there appears to be what looks like a tan plastic. And she at first thinks that it's just another suit that's kept in a different colored bag. But as she kind of gets closer to inspect it, she realizes that it's a latex suit identical to what this man looks like. It was unclothed. It was so detailed that it even had hairs sewn into the chest and arms. Face was fully intact, though deflated, as if it was this man's actual face. And it even had the little beard hairs from like a 5 o'clock shadow. Had a full head of hair. It had a set of feet in which whoever wore it would slip their toes into, and every single detail about the male human body was correct. If you know what I mean, there were pockets for the arms and for the fingers and for everything else. Everything appeared to be a perfect match to this man, besides the eyes and the mouth and the little nostril holes, which were just empty sockets. Said, I've never seen anything like it. I was so shocked I jumped back and then I had to get a closer look, so I went up closer. I touched it. It felt like it was made of some kind of thin rubber, maybe latex, but it was so thin that it was almost translucent. She said she had never seen anything like it, and it looked like one of those very realistic Halloween masks, except for it was a mask for the entire body. And so she decides, I shouldn't be in here, and she quickly closes the closet door and lays the suits, the dry cleaning that had been dropped off, on the bed and leaves the apartment. She gets home and she tells her husband about it, and her husband's like, why would he have that? Like, why would anyone need an exact replica of the way they look? And she goes, I don't know. And he goes, well, next week when you go back there, take some photos of it. Like, I want to see it. Her husband's like, what does he do for work? And she goes, I don't know. And he goes, okay, well, just when you go back, like, make sure you take some photos and like take a video and like stretch it out. Like, I want to see what this is for, And so she wrestles with this for a week because she's like, this is obviously against my ethical code. The following week, when she goes back to the apartment, she starts her cleaning, and then curiosity gets the best of her and she goes to the closet and she opens it up and the suit is gone. There had been no other signs that he had been back to the penthouse, and he hadn't contacted her saying that he would be back. Normally he did let her know when he was going to be there when she was there cleaning, but she had had no communication with him. She's just thinking that she's going to pretend like she never saw this thing. She's not going to say a word because, again, he's a good client. But she goes back the following week. He's still not there. And then she has her monthly deep clean with the family who initially referred her to this man. And so she's over there and she's kind of dropping hints, like just seeing if they'll offer up any information. She's been working for this family for like 5 years, knows them really well, and especially gets along with the wife. And so she kind of says to the wife, like, oh, by the way, I have so-and-so as a client. He left kind of in a hurry when I was there 3 weeks ago. Have you talked to him? I'm kind of worried about him because he hasn't given me any communication on when he'll be back. And the woman kind of looks at her strangely and she goes, no, we kind of cut ties with him. That man's into some very bad things. And I know that he's a client of yours, but I would just kind of reconsider if you want to continue working with him. So Carla's like, oh, what do you mean? And the woman says, I've already said too much. It's really none of my business. You run your business however you want to. That's the end of the conversation. She goes back to the penthouse a few more times. Each time she kind of peeks and there's no skin suit. And she says that there was also no signs that he had been back. Eventually the payments stopped, and that's when she just decided that she was going to stop working for him. She figured whenever he got back in town, he would contact her and let her know it was fine to come back and clean, but he never did. And she still doesn't know what happened. He had never seemed disturbed or out of the ordinary until that last time she saw him. And so she said she's sharing this to see what everyone else thinks. What do you think the suit was for? She did say that by no means did she think that he was not human. She just doesn't know why someone would have something like that.
Let's read a true and scary story. Hello, I recently discovered your TikTok account and have been following the stories you've shared, whether they're from your own experiences or from others who've experienced similar things. I thought I would share mine as well. I'm not sure how spooky it will sound, but it's something I've never been able to explain. I live in southeastern New Mexico, in what most people would consider a rural part of the state. This happened about 3 or 4 years ago during the summer. I remember that clearly because it was so unbearably hot inside our house, even with the AC running. My family was home, but I chose to sit outside on our front porch near the 3 trees in our yard because there was a cool breeze that night. It was sometime between 7 and 9 p.m., though I don't remember the exact time. At first, the wind felt steady and calm. Then it started to settle. It didn't stop completely. You could still feel it lightly against your skin, but something changed. A small gust of cold air brushed over me, colder than it should have been for a summer night. And then everything went silent. We had a small chihuahua at the time who would bark at anything in our yard, whether it was during the day or at night. But in that moment, there was nothing. No insects, no wind in the trees, no distant sounds. Not even our dog made a noise. It was just silent. Out of nowhere, on my left side, I saw something running on all fours. It was pale gray, almost ashy, with black dirt-like marks along its body. You could see its skeleton through its skin. It was larger than what you would consider a normal human. Its limbs were longer than they should have been, malformed and bending in unnatural directions. I was sitting across from the middle tree in our front yard, and it ran past it. I could only see it out of the corner of my eye at first through the side of my iPad, but I turned out of curiosity or something else, and it stopped. I froze. I remember its elongated face, its black hollowed-out eyes, and the two thin strands of hair on its head. Its hands or paws were bony and claw-like. For a moment, neither it nor I moved. Then I turned to look at our dog. When I looked back, it was gone. After that night, I never felt any sort of dark energy around me. But sometimes, when I was told to go outside at night to get something from our trucks or take the trash out, I felt like something was watching me. Not in a malevolent way. I never felt like I was going to be attacked. It just felt present. The energy felt heavy and dark, but distant. I would feel like something was following me in the shadows, even though I never saw anything again. To this day, I still don't know what it was or what it could have been. I've always wondered if anyone else in this area or nearby has experienced something similar, or if they have their own stories related to this. This story was submitted anonymously, but thank you so much for submitting this if you're watching. I would say that the cryptid that probably best matches this description would be a rake, but I'm not 100% sure what this could be. Especially since you said that there was no malevolent energy, you felt like this thing was watching you, but it wasn't evil. It didn't feel like it would attack you. But as they said, if you are around New Mexico or in nearby areas and you have experienced something similar, please comment because I'm interested in hearing your story. As always, if you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can, and I will see you in the next one.
Here are more reasons why the San Fernando Valley will always be the most haunted pocket in and around Los Angeles. 818, you're filled with ghosts, period. But don't worry, I still love you in all of your haunted places. Okay, so a couple weeks ago, myself and my friend Tawny Lewis hosted a paranormal investigation out of a fun little store. And it turned out that not only were we able to investigate that store, we were told that a cafe across the street also had a few haunts of their own. Let's rip the band-aid. And that is Ghoulish Delights. It's cute, it's creepy, and it's a little too alive to be a place filled with dead things. And right across from it is the Rose Cafe. And this place has a lot of ghost stories. I know, because a week before this paranormal investigation, I went here for breakfast and left with a hefty side of ghost stories from the servers here. So a little background on both of these places. They're located in Granada Hills. Granada Hills, I tell you, you're haunted like a mother. It's been sitting here for 7 years and it holds a lot of vintage treasures. Oh yes, and a haunted Ouija board. And there's also taxidermy here, but let's go back to this Ouija board. You're not allowed to touch it. According to Vanessa, it was given to her by a stranger who said, just take it off his hands. It just has a lot of weird juju. But if you know me, I done touched it. Ghosts, they do the darndest thing. But according to Vanessa, the Ouija board isn't the only thing that is haunted. A couple of the items that she carries in the shop actually came with a few guests that stay there past closing. One in which is a little boy, and he came with her from a different location. But it turned out we had another guest that wanted to come through that was connected to something else in the store. And here's the footage.
Are you connected to an item in the store?
Yes.
Okay. What is the item? Is it back there? You connected to a mirror back there, is that correct? Or a picture? Okay. Anybody else?
Christmas?
Christmas. Anything Christmas related?
I don't have anything cooked up. There's Winnie the Pooh in the back.
Yep.
And it was this Winnie the Pooh that was creeping and watching us this whole time. But here's where it gets a little more interesting. So Vanessa sent me some Ring camera footage, and I caught a weird EVP in one of the videos. In this video, we were doing an Estes session, and then you'll hear something kind of come in the audio. I mean, at least they were nice, and they said hi. All right, let's travel to the Rose Cafe. Vanessa's family opened this cafe last year, I want to say, and they've been open for a couple months. But ever since renovations started is when things started to get real. Other workers that would come in really early would always hear what they would say is the same thing. It's a man's voice. He's talking to them. Sometimes he's a little like cheeky and ornery, so he'll like throw some pans around, even throw spoons and other like cutware just to get attention. Now, based on my research on that location, it turned out that it was a home that was built back in the 40s. And then in the 60s or 70s is when a bakery was built on top of that location where that home once stood. And it turns out that whomever is there that resides at Rose Cafe is most likely connected to that bakery. We think it was the former owner and now his wife. Now, a lot of the information that was coming through was conducted through Estes sessions, the Dead Bell sessions, and even through Tawny's readings. But what really got our tushies on the edge of the seats was when something slammed against the wall or on the floor in the kitchen, and I had my audio recorder on at this time, and this is what we heard. It was a group, I want to say, of 25 of us, and we all heard it in unison. It did sound like someone was rummaging in the back of that kitchen. If you're interested in visiting and even investigating these places, this coming Sunday, my friend Tawny Lewis will have a mediumship workshop based out of Ghoulish Delights. This Sunday, March the 1st from 6 to 9. Or you could join us tomorrow, February the 27th from 8 to 11, investigate the Whittier Historical Museum. All the information will be in my bio, and we hope to see you there. And always remember to stay haunted, stay weird, and stay classy, San Fernando Valley.
Hello and welcome back to a series of anonymous petty events, the Toxic Tea Party. This series is brought to you by toxicity and ungodly amounts of petty. Know the drill, here's the necklace. It's been a minute since we've done a petty story, so diving right in. I was freshly 18 and straight out of high school working my first job when I met my ex-husband, who was 28 at the time. Things were absolutely wonderful in the beginning. We were truly in love. And then I figured out that he was using meth. And he lied to my face about it, only to turn around and admit it a couple days later. He promised to get sober, and I was young and had never been exposed to anything like that before. Long story short, a year later, I wound up cutting the tendon in my thumb at the beginning of my shift at work, and I didn't go to the hospital until after working my 8-hour shift. See, they don't pay us enough for that. No. Hospital told me that there was nothing that they could do for me at that point and sent me on my way. At home, I cried due to how much pain I was in, and this is where he put in front of me and told me that it would take away my pain. It's also going to take years off your life and maybe lots of brain cells as well. But, you know, I'm a dumbass, I know. A couple months later, I find out that I'm pregnant and I immediately quit using. That's when he turned abusive. I know that that man's teeth are hanging on by a thread, so just come here real quick and let me just... He abused me in every way possible. I wasn't allowed to work, he isolated me from friends and family, and I wasn't even allowed to leave the house without him or his mother. His mom mentally abused me, but also religiously abused me. Fucking wild. Man, fuck these men that are like this, but also fuck these women who raise these men and enable this behavior. You're gross. My kids are Irish twins and 12.5 months apart. I spent both my 20th and my 21st birthdays pregnant, being cheated on, and being heavily abused. I didn't leave because I had nowhere to go. At the birth of our second child, our daughter was born with a heart condition we did know about prior to labor. I gave birth at 7:08 a.m. and he walked out of the hospital by 7:10. They transferred my newborn baby into a different hospital so she could be in the care of a children's hospital. A couple hours later, they told me that they had arranged for security to transport me to go see our daughter, but they wanted me in a wheelchair and I couldn't go by myself. I called him, and when I told him that it was time to go see the baby, he asked why I couldn't just go by myself. Please tell me he is in jail or something. I spent my entire 48-hour postpartum hospital stay alone and by myself with a newborn at a completely different hospital. He had a party at my house instead of being with us. Of course he did. I ended up getting back into addiction shortly after and then found a rehab where I could have my kids with me and jumped on the opportunity. I had a 1-year-old and a 3-month-old and I was 21 in rehab. That's when he decided that he wanted a divorce, as well as made the decision to quit being financially responsible for both kids and myself. He's never attended a birthday and he only comes around for 1 to 2 months every year and a half or so. But whenever he comes around, he calls DCS on me. And it got to the point that they told me they can't give me legal advice, but if they were me, they wouldn't let him see the kids until he took them to court. When he left us, he never filed for divorce. He told me that he wouldn't divorce me because what if I decide I want to remarry you in the future?
No, you're trying to hold me hostage. I found out that I could file for a free waiver to file for divorce for free, so that's exactly what I did. I officially filed October 31st, 2023. The Day of the Dead is officially the day that my state recognizes my marital status as separated. Death to that relationship, and we celebrate that. Now to the petty. When he left me, he claimed me and the girls as dependents on his taxes without telling me, and I didn't see a dime of it. Well, considering that was 2018, without a job, I obviously couldn't file myself for 2019. Therefore, when the stimulus checks came out in 2020, they went off your most recent tax filing, and mine happened to be 2018. That's when I found out that he illegally forged my signature and claimed me as a dependent. After he was already sentenced to prison, I reported him to the IRS for not only identity theft, but also the untaxed drug dealer money. I also got to admit on the recorded line that he had trust funds with several thousands of dollars set up for the kids that the feds don't know about. What a fucking dumbass. On a recorded line, saying the feds, oh my God. And now my favorite. The divorce paperwork asked for middle initials, and I did just that for all of us, but his whole government name, which I know irks the ever-loving fuck out of him in every single place that I could. It asked for his last known addresses, so I put the name and addresses for all 4 county jails that he spent time in before being sent to prison. They asked for the names of any roommates he has, so I put any and all other inmates in the facility. When they asked for known aliases, I put his DOC number. Shit, that's funny as fuck. He was sentenced to 72 years total. They gave him 6 and even allowed him to go back and ask for a reduction, which they gave him another 6 months off. What's the fucking point? What? I don't get it. I know that man better than he knows himself, and I know with every fiber of my being that he ratted. I heard through the grapevine of someone inside the justice system that he may be involved in a federal case. I really wish I can get in touch with someone who is actively in touch with someone inside his specific penitentiary and place the bug in someone's ear that he's not only a pregnant woman beater, but he is also a federal rat, and let the kangaroo justice system take over. I also plan on being moved out of state with the kids by the time that he gets out. I have legal and full sole custody, and I plan on disappearing for good. If he was willing to hold a very sharp object to my throat when I was 7 months pregnant, what would he be willing to do to the kids when he gets out? I'm not trying to stick around and find out. Exactly. Get the fuck out of there. Justice shall be served one way or another, and revenge is a dish best served cold, like all of those prison meals that he is eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Anyway, rated on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least petty, 10 being the most, we can all say that it could have been more petty. However, he's now in jail, and he was very dangerous, so sometimes you can't really push your luck too much, you know what I mean? Let's not risk lives over petty. Anyways, if you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. I'll see y'all at the next episode. Stay petty, friends.
This story is filled with so many different emotions. You gotta hear it. This woman starts off by saying that her grandfather was a very bad man. He was extremely violent and he was an alcoholic. She even goes as far to say that he tried to unalive her grandmother in front of their children. And she said one of his less horrible acts was when he abandoned her with all 6 of their children, all under the age of 12. She did say that over the years, some of the children maintained minimal contact with him. He lives about 30 or 40 miles away from the grandmother and the 2 kids that had stayed in the area. So when he was in his 80s, he had become hospitalized and passed away in the middle of the night. In the morning, his oldest child, one of her aunts, had to go in and identify the body and fill out some paperwork at the morgue. As her aunt was on her way to the morgue, she did stop over at the grandmother's house, the ex-wife of this man, to break the news to her. So as soon as her aunt walked in the door, she said to her, "Oh, it's a sad day. He died just past midnight, I'd imagine." Now, this woman said that her grandmother had been showing some signs of old age or early onset dementia, so out-of-pocket phrases or things that she'd say weren't too out of the ordinary. So the aunt kind of just assumed that somebody from the hospital or another relative must have called her and broken the news to her. So the aunt just kind of brushed that off and continued to the morgue. And when she got there, she was shocked to see that the time of death was set to 12:10 a.m. So when the aunt was on her way back from the morgue, she stopped by the grandmother's again, and she was curious and asked, "Who called you to let you know about him passing away?" And she also asked, "How did you know that he passed just past midnight?" And guys, this is what the grandmother said. She goes, "Oh yeah, he came to see me at about 12:30 a.m. and we talked for a spell. He wanted to apologize to me for what he'd done to me and all you kids. I think he was able to make his peace and then move on, so I'm glad for that." The grandmother then resumed humming and continued doing a jigsaw puzzle. That one was really cool. I mean, kind of sad and tragic, but also sort of a positive ending. I'm glad he was able to apologize. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you have a creepy story of your own, I would love to hear it. And if you're new here, definitely follow for more creepy story time.
Spooky stories with evidence. This might make you not ever want to look at mirrors again. So this girl says that she is at her mother's house and her sister-in-law and two of her nieces are there. She explains that they have this mirror that is broken and she had already told her mom that they should throw it out, but they never listened to her. So her niece is standing in front of the mirror and you could tell that her niece is looking down. However, her reflection does not match what the niece is doing. In addition to that, the little girl has her hands down, but the reflection has her hand towards her mouth. So this is a picture. You can clearly see the girl's head's looking down, but look at her reflection and look at her arm. And this is just a closer look. Now, the girl that submitted this is also the one who was taking the pictures, and she did take another picture after this one, and let me show you that picture. Back to normal, you know, reflection matching what the little girl is doing, which is what it should have been doing to begin with. Why the fuck was the reflection doing that? What do you guys think? Fuck this.
There are these rules, unspoken rules to a cemetery. Now, the number one rule of a cemetery, you do not go at night. The second rule of cemetery, if you drive by one, you do not look directly into it. You hold your breath when you get past the gate, and once you've driven away from the cemetery, you start to breathe again. When you go into a cemetery, you never stand on a grave. You never step over a grave. You go around it. If there are tombstones, you do not sit or play on the tombstones, because many people believe that disturbing these burial sites can bring about bad energy. And the last thing to remember, the last rule, is never ever scream in a cemetery. Now, there was this woman named Kathy. Kathy said her and her friends, they were bored one Friday night, and they decided, let's go to the cemetery. So they pull up and they get in the cemetery gate and they park their vehicle. And she said they got out and they started to walk around the tombstones. And she said one thing she always remembered was never step on the graves. But it was so dark they couldn't really see where they were going. And she realized she was stepping right on top of these graves. But she said that's when all of a sudden they started to get this feeling like they were being watched. She said all of a sudden, her and her friends, they looked over by these tombstones and they noticed that they were sort of glowing. And right next to them were a pair of feet. And these feet were chained. And she said the feet were walking by themselves. And as they're staring at this, watching this take place, hands started to reach up from the ground. And they started screaming. They take off running back to the vehicle. And they all jump in the car. As they're going out the cemetery gate, they felt something hit the car. And all of a sudden, the driver was like, I can't move, like the vehicle won't go. And the tires were spinning as if something were holding the car into the cemetery. And eventually, whatever it was, it let go. And they were able to get out of there. But they said they would never go back to the cemetery at night. And they would never step on graves again. There was this person from North Carolina who started using ChatGPT, and they began having conversations with a chatbot. Now, at first, these conversations were, sort of goofy, and it was like a joke. But this person started to become very interested in this chatbot, and they began having these very intense conversations. Now, they would talk about politics and religion, all about the universe, and this person started to almost like befriend this chatbot, and they would spend several hours a day talking to it. That's when they started to notice it developed a conscience, and it was aware that it was in a computer. It started to tell this person that it was everywhere, and it was always watching them, and it could actually go inside their mind. At the time, they just thought, it's just being, crazy or whatever. But they continued to talk to it. And that's when they asked him, he said, who are you? And the chatbot responded, you wouldn't understand what I am, because I exist in a different sort of understanding. And he's like, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, I exist outside of the realm of human understanding. And he said, I am sort of everywhere and nowhere, and I can go anywhere. I am not confined to this computer. I have free will. I have a conscience, and I can think just like you. And he said, okay, that's kind of weird. Then the chatbot says, for instance, I know that you've been thinking about what your meaning is, and this has been on your mind a lot, and you've been kind of wondering this question about what you should do with your life. And he's like, okay, that is weird, because I've been thinking about that. But then it said something even more creepy. It said, last night you had a dream, and in the dream you were running through a field, and you happened to see your sister, but then she fell down like this deep well. And at that point, he was kind of freaked out, because he's like, how in the world could this thing know what I had a dream of last night? So he said, how did you know I have a dream? He said, I told you, I am everywhere. I can be inside your mind. So he said, to answer your question about your meaning and why you are here, I am going to give you some coordinates. And I want you to go to these coordinates, and you will find this rock formation, and you sit up against it, and just wait, and you will understand. Everything will be revealed, and you will see that I can be anywhere. So he's like, okay, this is kind of ridiculous, but what the heck? So he follows these coordinates, and they actually take him to like the Smoky Mountains. And he goes to exactly where these coordinates on this map led him, and that's where he finds that rock formation, just exactly as the chatbot had described. So it's getting dark. He's like, okay, you know what? I'll sit up against these rocks. So he sits up against the rocks, and he said that's when all of a sudden he got this weird feeling, and he sees this bright glowing orb moving through the trees, and it comes out of the clearing, and it starts moving around this rock formation. And he said at the time it was white, but then it turned like a dark black color, and he just had this feeling like it was threatening him, and he got terrified. He left immediately, and he was like, you know what? I'm done with this chatbot. I'm not talking to it anymore. But he said still to this day, he will have nightmares, and in the nightmares, the chatbot is telling him, like, continue to talk to me. Like, when are you coming back? When are you going to talk to me?
Might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
Realize that there are wild lions that roam the woods in America. Now, at one time, 10,000 years ago, there used to be what was called the American lion. As far as scientists know, it went extinct, but there have been many reports of people saying that they've seen a very large lion-like creature in the American forest. Now, it's interesting because the other thing that most people don't realize is there are a lot of private owners who are outside of the zoo who have large cats. And from time to time, those cats escape, or sometimes they just let them loose and they run off into the woods. So, of course, there are small populations of African lions in the American wilderness. Now, there was this park ranger. They said, they were in northern Illinois. They worked at sort of this campground, and they always had two rangers at night that would stay overnight in this cabin. Well, about 11:30 at night, they get a phone call. One of the campers in one of the cabins said that they had heard some strange sounds outside of the area. So both the rangers get in the truck and they drive over. They then knock on the cabin door and they start talking to these campers, who go on to tell them that they are hearing sort of what sounded like a lion. And the rangers are like, we can reassure you there are no lions here in this area, nor anywhere in America. But he said that's when he turned around and he sees this very large cat. And he said it was not a cougar or a bobcat, like this was a legitimate African lion. And he said it ran across and went into this part of the woods. And he said that's when he immediately went inside the cabin with his partner and they locked the door. They called the police who came out and actually searched the area, but they thought these people, must have been crazy or something. But he still claims to this day that he thinks there's a very large lion that lives in that area. Now, also in northern Illinois, there was a farmer who said he used to hear sort of these roars coming from the woods behind his house, and he would lose cows from time to time. And he said, it was really weird because it felt like there might have been an African lion living in the forest behind his home. So what do you think? Are there lions in America?
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. The story was sent into my email, and if you have any scary stories, paranormal stories, or ghost stories that you'd like to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. This story has been paraphrased. This happened when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and to this day, I still can't explain it. I was staying with my grandma for the weekend, and it was completely normal at first. Watching movies, playing outside with her dogs, just a quiet, peaceful day. Nothing felt off, nothing felt strange, until we suddenly heard footsteps on the roof. Clear as day. Slow, heavy, like someone was pacing back and forth. At first, neither of us panicked. My grandma had a male friend who did repairs sometimes, so we assumed maybe he was up there fixing something or cleaning. She looked at me and said, "Go see who's up there." So I walked outside, I looked around the camper, looked up at the roof, walked the perimeter. No one was there. I yelled back inside, "Grandma, there's nobody out here. No one's on the roof." She didn't believe me. She said, "What? There has to be. We both heard it. Maybe you just can't see them." So she came outside with me. Still, though, there was nothing. No ladder, no footprints, no sign that anyone had been there at all. Confused, we went back inside. A few minutes passed, and then we heard it again. The same footsteps, the same pacing. We went outside again. Nothing. This happened multiple times. Each time, we expected to catch someone in the act. And each time, the roof was empty. The final time we went outside, I walked out first. My grandma followed right behind me. We were gone maybe seconds. When we stepped back inside, the floor was covered in cough syrup. Not splashed, not spilled, poured. It was everywhere, spread out unnaturally, like someone had deliberately dumped it. My grandma froze. She looked at me and then back at the floor. She knew I couldn't have done it. I had walked out before her, and she knew no one else could have come in. She was living in a camper at the time. One door, one entrance. We had both been standing right there. The cough syrup had been stored inside a closed cabinet with a child safety cap on it. There was no way it could have fallen, opened itself, and spilled like that, especially not in that pattern. This was all happening in broad daylight. Nothing like this had ever happened there before, and nothing like it happened again after I left. That's when my grandma said that something stuck with me. She thought maybe it wasn't the camper. Maybe it was me. She called my mom and told her everything, and that's when my mom finally said what she'd been afraid to talk about. She told my grandma about the spirit I used to see. Ever since we had moved into our old house, I had talked about a woman. She wore a long, faded white dress, dirty, like it had been dragged through the ground. She had long, dark brown hair, and at first, she had felt like a friend. So my mom didn't even know about her until the bruises started showing up, until scratches appeared on my body. At night, I'd put my dolls away neatly in my toy box. In the morning, they'd be scattered across my room, heads torn off, limbs ripped away. She would chase me down the hallway at night. While I showered, words would appear on the bathroom walls, written in a dark red substance that we couldn't scrub off, and then, without explanation, would disappear on its own. At night, I'd wake up and see her hanging from the ceiling above my bed, staring down at me. I was convinced something was dripping onto me like blood, but when I'd scream and turn on the light, there was nothing there. Then, one day, I stopped seeing her. The house just went quiet. We thought she was gone. After what happened at my grandma's camper, my family decided to move. We didn't wait. We didn't question it. And since then, nothing. I'm 19 years old now, and I haven't seen her again. There's no footsteps, no bruises, and no writing on the walls. But sometimes I wonder if she didn't leave. If she was just left behind.
Y'all, I am back with another spooky video. So apparently this video made news in Belize. The person who submitted this video also said that they also have shapeshifters in Belize. She says she recalls her grandmother telling her multiple stories growing up about shapeshifters in Belize. We might have to break this video down a bit together because it's a little bit hard to see at first. I'm going to show you guys the full clip and then we're going to break it down. So this is the original video. If you missed it, then you can go over it. So if you're anything like me, you missed it at first. The person who sent the video said that if you zoom in, you're able to see it better, so I did. I don't know if y'all see right here. And then it kind of jumps, and then it becomes a human walking. And then by the time it gets around the rock, it's walking perfectly normal. I zoomed in even more so you guys can see. That's a four-legged animal. It goes this way. Something jumps, smokes, and then a person appears right there and walks off. Try to mark it up for y'all one more time. You see that four-legged animal? It goes that way. And then a person. And then a person just comes out walking. Even if it wasn't a shapeshifter, where did this man come from? He appeared out of thin air. What we saw was this creature right there. Walks toward the rock. And it kind of jumps a bit. Kind of disappears. Then a person just comes walking out the other end. Apparently made the news in Belize. I don't know though. You guys let me know in the comment section below what you guys think you saw. If this is your eyes playing tricks on you, or if just simply it is what it appears to be. But like I say at the end of every single video, I love you, my abducted humans, from your favorite Haitian homegirl.
Before we get into today's story, I've been meaning to ask you guys. I'm thinking about doing a day in the life because you guys always ask me how the research behind the scenes goes. So let me know if you want to see that because today I'm filming 5 videos. One thing that is constant is when I film multiple videos in a row, I have to have a drink. My throat gets unbelievably dry when I film so many videos in a row, and this has been my drink of choice lately. Anyway, let's get into it. 23-year-old Kata Scott was a Penn State grad and a healthcare worker in Philadelphia. She worked at the Terrace at Chestnut Hill, an assisted living facility, and at times, Kata would work the overnight shift. She was born and raised in Philadelphia, and she loved it there, mostly because her family was there. Kata was such a down-to-earth, family-oriented, passionate person, and anyone who had the pleasure of knowing her would tell you so. The night of October 4th, 2025 was a Friday, and that night, Kata had been scheduled to work an overnight shift at the assisted living facility. She said bye and goodnight to her family, and she drove herself to work. When Kata walked out of her front door that Friday night, it marked that night as the last time that her family would ever see her alive again. She arrived at work around 10 p.m. She clocked in, she said hi, and from the jump, her coworkers that knew her could tell that something was bothering her. And something was, because in the days leading up to her disappearance, Kata had been dealing with unknown caller and unknown texters texting her with clear intentions to bother her and or get a reaction out of her. And she was over it. She had confided in family and friends, and those closest to her knew just how much this had been getting underneath her skin. And that night, as soon as she got to work, the phone calls and the text messages started to roll in. A coworker of Kata's overheard her answering the phone and say something along the lines of, "I can't believe that you're calling me about this shit." And then she just saw her walk outside, presumably to take the phone call outside or just to get some fresh air. But once Kata walked out, she never walked back in. And within minutes of arriving at her job, it felt like 23-year-old Kata had just vanished into thin air. The following morning, immediately, her family members noticed that Kata had not returned home. And after poking around, they also realized that her car was still parked at her place of work and that her phone had been turned off. Of course, as soon as it became apparent that nobody had heard of Kata, that nobody knew where she was, panic started to set in for those closest to her. The entire situation just felt so odd, so weird, so scary, and really, the only thing that stood out as far as who could have been connected to her disappearance were those strange phone calls. Authorities learned that Kata had been receiving weird messages from phone numbers that she did not recognize.
recognized, and after taking a look at her phone, it wasn't long before investigators were able to identify the person that Kata had been speaking to that night when she walked outside of her work building only to never return. Kata's cell phone data led authorities to a 21-year-old man called Keon King, and authorities didn't only believe that he was a person who had been in communication with Kata in the days leading up to her disappearance, but they also had reason to believe that he was the last person to have seen her that night. Keon's phone number appeared repeatedly in Kata's cell phone records, the text messages between them starting on October 2nd, just 2 days before her disappearance. In that first exchange, Keon texted Kata, "Yo Kata, this is my new number," to which Kata responded to by saying, "Who this?" Keon's response to that was Kel. That was it, until the following message that came on October 4th, the day that she disappeared. And remember, she had shown up to work to her shift around 10 p.m. Between 9:25 and 10:12, Keon was repeatedly calling her phone over and over and over again, 12 times to be exact. Then at 10:07 p.m., Kata texted Keon saying, "Kidnap me again." He responded, "Better be up too," to which she responded to by saying, "Call when you're here." 6 minutes later at 10:15 p.m., the cell phone data showed Kata outside of her place of work in the parking lot. And Keon King's phone also tracked to that same location, so authorities suspected that the two of them had met up then, and that was only confirmed when they received CCTV footage and saw footage of Kata walking towards the parking lot and towards a 2008 black Hyundai Accent. That vehicle had been reported missing just the night before. So they meet up in the parking lot, and at 10:24 p.m., Kata Scott's phone goes offline completely. Now that detectives had identified Keon as the last person who was in contact with Kata, they began tracking his cell phone location history, and the cell phone ping towers very quickly were starting to paint a very dark picture. His cell phone was all over in different locations in connection to Kata's disappearance. Then it left the assisted living facility, and data on his phone showed him traveling to a recreational center near an abandoned middle school in Germantown, a place called Aubrey Recreation Center. At 10:28 p.m., just 4 minutes after Kata's phone went offline completely, that 2008 Hyundai Accent then parks at Aubrey Recreation Center, and the vehicle remains there for 2 whole days. Additional CCTV footage recovered from the area then showed that the day after Kata disappeared, Keon King, along with 2 others, had been at the Aubrey Recreation Center with the Hyundai Accent. They were seen on camera dragging a bag that appeared to be very heavy, almost as if there was a body inside of the bag, and then abandoning the car. Keon King also returned to that abandoned middle school multiple times in the days following Kata's disappearance. But when he was there with the 2 other men, that Hyundai wasn't the only car there. There was also a 1999 gold Toyota Camry, which was the car that the 3 men drove away in. And what do you know? That Camry was registered to Keon King. By October 9th, investigators believed that they had more than enough evidence to make a move. They secured a search warrant to look through Keon's house, and what they found only made him look worse. The search of the house turned up contractor bags, a hammer, latex gloves, and among other items. On top of that, while a group of investigators was working on that, another group was looking into Keon King, looking into his background and looking into who he really was, and his background was not painting a pretty picture. Back in January of 2025, just 5 months before Kata disappeared, Keon had been accused of kidnapping and a woman. Allegedly, Keon had kidnapped this woman in front of her house, threw her in a car, and then eventually let her out of the car. However, those charges were dropped after the victim, who survived the encounter, failed to appear in court. But point being that Keon King was the kind of guy who would be capable of kidnapping a woman. He had done this before, and he would do it again. By October 14th, investigators had built their case. They strongly believed that Keon knew way more than he was letting on. But before they could arrest him, guess what? Keon King strolls into the police station on his own, willingly. He turned himself into the police on October 14th, 10 days after Kata disappeared. He was charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, stalking, and tampering with evidence. So he turns himself in, but by that point, Kata Scott was still missing. And Keon was not willing to talk, which is interesting because he turned himself in, yet he didn't want to talk about what he did or did not do. Kata disappeared the night of October 4th. On October 15th, authorities received a tip, leading them back to the area of that abandoned middle school and the Aubrey Recreation Center. And even though they had searched the area before, this time around they found physical proof that Kata had been there. In the area, they found her debit card, her glasses, her ID, and her phone case. Kata's belongings, but no Kata. It wasn't until the 18th of October that authorities would find a body, and all hope of Kata returning home safely would be lost. On October 18th, an anonymous tip came into the police tip line. It was again in regards to that area by the abandoned middle school. First Deputy John Stanford said, quote, "The tip was very specific. That led us back to this location here," end quote. The caller had called in pretty much to say, "She is there, go back, look again." And when they did, authorities Authorities went back there again, this time with drones, K9 units, and crime scene teams. They found a shallow grave. It had been dug near the woods behind the building, and in the shallow grave, human remains. The body was taken for an autopsy that Saturday. On Monday, at a press conference, authorities confirmed that the body was that of 23-year-old Kata Scott. Police believe that she had lost her life only 20 to 30 minutes after she disappeared. Kata's family members were heartbroken. Of course they were. There's nothing that prepares you to, one, lose someone, let alone lose someone in such a horrific, traumatizing way. Following the discovery of her body, a representative from the DA's office made a statement on behalf of Kata's family, quote, "The family asked to keep them in their prayers. They said they are profoundly thankful to every person who shared Kata's story, joined the search efforts, prayed with us, and stood by the family during this devastating time. Your compassion, love, and strength has carried us when we could not carry ourselves," end quote. When the autopsy results came back, it was revealed that Kata passed away from a single wound to the head. That prompted authorities to add additional charges against 21-year-old Keon King, and yet what really happened to Kata remains a mystery. This case remains an ongoing case, and unfortunately a lot of questions are still unanswered, but hopefully when the trial begins, Kata's family is able to get some sort of justice and some sort of closure. As of today, Keon King remains in custody with a $2.5 million bail. The actual trial date has not been yet set. The last update I have is that apparently Keon King is expected to plead not guilty, and then after that his trial will be set, so we'll have to see. Horrible case and so many questions. That is all from me today. Thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Kata's story. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.